The high-pitched whine of the restraining cuffs grated against Ethan Cross's ears as the Zalaxis guards shoved him forward. The dim, flickering lights of the transport bay painted the scene in sharp relief. The sharp edges of alien weapons, the cold glint of armor, and the sneers plastered across their strange, angular faces. Ethan kept his gaze low, his breathing steady, masking the simmering storm beneath his calm exterior. "Human trash," one of the guards sneered, his voice a guttural rasp. "You're lucky we didn't execute you on the spot." Ethan didn't respond. His hands were bound in front of him, heavy chains looped through the restraints. He shuffled along, playing the part of a defeated man. The transport ship docked with a jarring thud, signaling their arrival at Krythar Prime. Even through the ship's hull, Ethan felt the oppressive heat radiating from the volcanic prison world. He'd read about this place. No one left Krythar Prime alive. It was where hope came to die. The guards yanked him out of the bay and onto the landing platform. The air was thick with sulfur and ash, burning his throat and stinging his eyes. Towering over the platform was the central spire of the facility, a massive obsidian monolith that seemed to pierce the sky. Floodlights scanned the area, illuminating rows of prisoners hunched over, breaking rocks or trudging in chains. A voice crackled through the comm system. "Prisoner transfer confirmed. ID 73928E species, human. Level 3 threat. Clear to process." Level 3? Ethan smirked inwardly. They had no idea. As they led him through the sprawling labyrinth of corridors, the monotony of steel and shadows was broken only by the occasional wail of a prisoner in the distance. The guards exchanged bored glances, confident in their control. One of them, a hulking brute with segmented plates across his neck, gave Ethan a shove. "Let me guess," the brute said. "Another rebel? Trying to overthrow the mighty Zalaxis Empire, were you?" Ethan stumbled slightly but straightened quickly, his tone even. "Something like that." The brute snorted. "Humans always think they're clever. You'll learn your place soon enough." They arrived at the processing chamber. A translucent barrier separated the prisoners from the command station where a figure loomed, a towering Zalaxis officer in black and crimson robes. High Warden Irix Vrail. Vrail studied Ethan with cold, calculating eyes, his thin mouth curling into a smirk. "So this is the infamous Ethan Cross," he said, his voice smooth yet laced with menace. "I expected more." Ethan met his gaze for the briefest moment. He saw it then, the arrogance, the belief that he was just another weak, disposable prisoner. Ethan's lips twitched into a faint smile before he looked down again. Vrail frowned. "No witty retort? No grand declarations? Pity. Perhaps you'll amuse me yet." He gestured dismissively. "Take him to Block 7. The guards yanked Ethan out of the chamber, and down another series of corridors until they reached a cramped, dimly lit cell. The walls were stained with unidentifiable grime, and the stench of despair hung thick in the air. They shoved him inside and deactivated the cuffs with a sharp buzz. "Enjoy your stay," one guard sneered as the cell door slammed shut behind him. Ethan scanned his surroundings. A single cot, a rusted water spout, and a view of the labor yard through a small, reinforced window. Outside, he could see prisoners dragging enormous crates under the watchful eyes of droned sentries. It was chaos, a system designed to break minds and bodies alike. A raspy voice broke the silence. "You're new." Ethan turned to see a wiry alien with pale, mottled skin crouched in the corner of the adjacent cell. The creature's eyes were sharp, filled with both curiosity and caution. "Name's Jarek," the alien said, gesturing with a clawed hand. "What's your story, human?" Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Just another unlucky soul the Empire wanted gone." Jarek chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "That makes two of us. Let me give you some advice, keep your head down. Krythar's not a place for heroes." "I'll keep that in mind," Ethan replied. The alien tilted his head, studying him. "You don't look like the others. Most fresh meat shakes in their boots. But you're different." Ethan didn't answer. He moved to the window and stared out at the yard, cataloging every detail. The drone patrol patterns, the guards' rotations, the positions of security cameras. He wasn't here to survive. He was here to escape. The next day, Ethan was dragged into the labor yard along with a throng of other prisoners. The guards barked orders, distributing crude tools for mining the dense, volcanic rock. Ethan played the part of an obedient prisoner, observing silently as the others toiled. The air was thick with ash, and the heat was oppressive, but he ignored the discomfort. His focus was razor-sharp. Nearby, a towering reptilian inmate snarled at a guard. "I've had enough of this!" The outburst was met with a brutal strike from the butt of a rifle, sending the inmate crumpling to the ground. The other prisoners averted their gazes, too beaten to react. Ethan kept digging, his expression neutral. He couldn't afford to draw attention, yet. Hours later, during a brief water break, Jarek sidled up to him. "You're quiet, but you're watching everything," the alien said. "You've got a plan, don't you?" "Let's just say I'm not planning on dying here," Ethan replied. Jarek snorted. "Bold talk for a dead man walking. You don't get it yet, nobody escapes Krythar. Not alive, anyway." Ethan turned to him, his gaze hard. "Maybe you've just been waiting for the right person to try." Before Jarek could respond, the sirens blared. A prison-wide lockdown. Guards poured into the yard, weapons drawn. Ethan clenched his fists, watching as several prisoners were rounded up, accused of hoarding tools. The guards dragged them off, their screams echoing long after they were gone. Ethan knew what this was: control through fear. The Zalaxis Empire ruled through brute force and intimidation. But they had a blind spot: arrogance. They underestimated him. They underestimated all of humanity. As the guards dispersed and the prisoners returned to their work, Ethan allowed himself a faint smile. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a ghost, a weapon honed to perfection. And the Empire had just made the worst mistake of its existence. They had given him time. And time was all he needed. The labor yard was alive with the clash of picks against stone, the groans of exhausted prisoners, and the ever-present hum of the drones that hovered overhead. Ethan Cross worked methodically, his movements precise and unhurried. Each swing of his pickaxe was calculated to conserve energy, all while his eyes darted across the yard, cataloging every detail. The guards patrolled in pairs, their movements synchronized to an almost mechanical rhythm. The drones moved in a predictable grid pattern, scanning the inmates with their glowing red optics. Ethan noted everything: the rotation schedules, the overlapping blind spots, the guards' casual chatter. To most prisoners, this was just another grueling day in Krythar Prime's hellish cycle. To Ethan, it was reconnaissance. Nearby, Jarek, the wiry alien who had taken an interest in him, hacked at the rock with frenetic energy. He paused occasionally to glance at Ethan, his sharp eyes gleaming with curiosity. Finally, he broke the silence. "You've got that look again," Jarek muttered, wiping the sweat from his pale, mottled brow. "Like you're 5 steps ahead of everyone else." Ethan didn't look up. "Observation saves lives." "Yeah? And what are you observing?" Jarek asked, his tone half joking but laced with genuine interest. Ethan stopped for a moment, leaning on his pickaxe. "Weaknesses," he said simply. Jarek barked a laugh, though it was tinged with unease. "You're either the most optimistic guy here or the craziest. Weaknesses don't exist in this place." "They all do," Ethan replied evenly, "if you look hard enough." Later that day, the prisoners were herded back into the main facility. Ethan kept his head down, blending into the crowd. As they trudged through the dimly lit corridors, a flicker of movement caught his eye, a shadow slipping through a vent just ahead. He made a mental note. Someone else was watching, moving unseen. In his cell that evening, Ethan reclined on the creaking cot, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed everything he'd observed that day. The drone patterns, the guard rotations, the fleeting shadow in the vents. He wasn't alone in his defiance, but he couldn't risk exposing himself too soon. Jarek's voice drifted through the bars separating their cells. "You're awfully quiet for someone who just survived their first full day in the yard." Ethan turned his head slightly. Thinking. Yeah? About what? Ethan hesitated, then decided to test the waters. What do you know about the drones? Jarek snorted. Enough to stay out of their way. Why? They're automated, Ethan said. Programmed to scan specific zones every 20 seconds. That leaves gaps, 2 to 3 seconds long. Jarek let out a low whistle. You've been busy. Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he shifted the conversation. What about the guards? Do they ever leave the facility? Jarek chuckled dryly. You're planning something, aren't you? But no, they don't leave. They live here, same as us. Only difference is they've got the keys. Keys can be taken, Ethan said. Jarek's laughter stopped abruptly. He leaned closer to the bars. You're serious? Ethan's gaze met his. Deadly. The next day, Ethan's observations bore fruit. While mining in the yard, he noticed a commotion near the eastern wall. A group of prisoners, led by a burly, scarred reptilian named Rax, was arguing with a pair of guards over rations. The distraction was brief, but it provided Ethan with an opportunity to examine the perimeter. He spotted a maintenance hatch near the base of the wall, partially obscured by rubble. It was locked, of course, but its presence was enough to light the spark of an idea. That night, Ethan approached Jarek. The alien was sitting cross-legged on his cot, fiddling with a makeshift tool fashioned from a piece of scrap metal. Do you know Rax? Ethan asked. Jarek looked up, his expression wary. Everyone knows Rax. He runs the black market in this place. Dangerous guy to cross. I need to talk to him, Ethan said. Jarek raised an eyebrow. Why? You planning to barter for a way out? Something like that. Jarek studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You're either going to get yourself killed or pull off the impossible. Either way, I'll enjoy the show. The meeting with Rax didn't go as smoothly as Ethan had hoped. The reptilian inmate was seated on a crude throne made of scavenged materials, flanked by his enforcers. He looked Ethan up and down, his yellow eyes narrowing. You've got guts, human, Rax growled. But guts don't mean much here. What do you want? I need information, Ethan said. About the maintenance hatch in the yard. Rax laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. And why should I tell you anything? Because I can help you, Ethan said. You've got rivals. Factions trying to take what's yours. I can give you an edge. Rax leaned forward, his massive claws tapping against the armrest of his throne. What kind of edge? Precision, Ethan said. I see things others miss. I can eliminate threats before they become problems. Rax studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fine. I'll tell you this much, that hatch leads to the lower maintenance tunnels. But it's a dead end, no way out. Ethan's mind raced. A dead end could still be a stepping stone if he could find a way to the control systems or power supply. Appreciate it, Ethan said, turning to leave. Rax's gravelly voice stopped him. One more thing, human. If you cross me, I'll rip you apart. Ethan glanced back, his expression unflinching. Noted. In the following days, Ethan worked tirelessly to piece together his plan. He avoided drawing attention, maintaining his quiet, observant demeanor. But his actions didn't go unnoticed. The guards began to eye him suspiciously, their instincts picking up on the subtle shift in his behavior. One evening, as Ethan returned to his cell, he found a crude message scrawled on the wall. Asterisk. We're watching. Asterisk. He turned sharply, scanning the corridor, but it was empty. Whoever had left the message was long gone. His mind churned. Someone, perhaps the shadow from the vent, knew he was up to something. The question was whether they were friend or foe. The tension in the prison escalated. Fights broke out more frequently, and the guards responded with increasing brutality. Ethan suspected that the instability wasn't entirely organic. Someone was stirring the pot, and it wasn't just him. One night, Jarek whispered through the bars. You're playing a dangerous game, Cross. But you've got people talking. Rumors are spreading. Some say you've got a plan to escape. Ethan's jaw tightened. Let them talk. Jarrick leaned closer. And if someone decides to sell you out to the guards? Ethan's gaze was icy. Then I deal with them. The alien nodded, a hint of respect in his expression. Fair enough. Just remember, Krythar doesn't let anyone go without a fight. Ethan smirked. Good thing I'm used to fighting. He turned to the window, his mind racing. The pieces were starting to come together, but he knew he was running out of time. Krythar was a chessboard, and Ethan was determined to checkmate the Empire, one move at a time. The hum of the labor yard's machinery vibrated through the air as Ethan Cross worked with quiet determination. His focus remained sharp, his movements calculated. The guards barked orders, their voices harsh against the oppressive heat, but Ethan heard none of it. His mind was elsewhere, on the maintenance hatch, on the cryptic message scrawled on his cell wall, and on the plan forming piece by piece in his head. Jarrick, ever the curious observer, sidled up beside him, his pale skin slick with sweat. You've been awfully quiet, even for you, he said, keeping his voice low. Something brewing in that head of yours. Ethan didn't stop working. Noticed anything strange lately? Jarrick snorted. Strange? You mean other than the daily beatings and the occasional riot? I'm talking about the message, Ethan said, pausing briefly to glance at Jarrick. The one in my cell. Jarrick's brow furrowed, and his voice dropped to a whisper. You're not the only one. A few others have gotten notes, too. Different words, same meaning. Someone's watching us. Who? Ethan asked, his tone calm but firm. No one knows, Jarrick replied. But if you're smart, you'll tread carefully. Whoever they are, they're good at staying hidden. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. Whoever was watching might be an ally, or a threat. Either way, he had no intention of slowing down. That night, as the prisoners were herded back to their cells, Ethan noticed a subtle shift in the guards' demeanor. They seemed more alert, their movements sharper, their gazes lingering a second longer than usual. Something was brewing. Once inside his cell, Ethan waited until the lights dimmed and the guards' footsteps faded into the distance. He turned to Jarrick, who was leaning against the bars of his adjacent cell. I need you to do something for me, Ethan said quietly. Jarrick raised an eyebrow. Oh, this should be good. Ethan leaned closer, his voice barely audible. I need intel on the Shadow Network. Whoever's leaving those messages, they're organized. Find out who they are. Jarrick chuckled softly. You've got a lot of faith in me, human. I've got faith in leverage, Ethan replied. And right now, we both want the same thing, answers. Jarrick nodded, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. All right, I'll see what I can dig up. But don't blame me if this gets us both killed. Ethan's gaze was steady. Just don't take too long. The next day, Ethan returned to the labor yard, his mind racing. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The drones hovered overhead, their red optics scanning the prisoners, but this was something else. A presence. A shadow in the periphery. Hours passed, and then it happened. A subtle tap on his shoulder, a signal, quick and discreet. Ethan turned to see a wiry woman with sharp eyes and a confident demeanor standing beside him. She was human, like him, but her face bore the scars of Krythar's cruelty. You're cross, she said, her voice low and measured. Ethan's grip on the pickaxe tightened. Depends on who's asking. The woman smirked. Name's Tessa. Let's just say I'm someone who's been keeping an eye on you. Ethan didn't respond, but his posture remained tense. Tessa leaned closer, her tone dropping to a whisper. You're not the only one planning an escape, she said. But if you want out, you'll need help. Ethan's eyes narrowed. And you're offering? Something like that, Tessa replied. There's a network, prisoners working together, trading information, resources. We've got a plan, but we need someone like you. Someone who can think 5 steps ahead. Ethan studied her for a moment. And what's in it for you? Tessa's smirk faded, replaced by a steely determination. Freedom. Same as you. He hesitated, then nodded. All right. What's the next step? Meet me in the tunnels tonight, Tessa said. Maintenance hatch, after lights out. Don't be late. With that, she melted back into the crowd, leaving Ethan to wonder whether he just gained an ally, or walked into a trap. When night fell, Ethan slipped out of his cell with practiced ease. He'd studied the guards' patrol patterns, timing his movements to avoid detection. The corridors were eerily silent, the dim lights casting long shadows against the steel walls. Reaching the maintenance hatch, he found it slightly ajar. He slipped inside, the air immediately cooler and damp with the scent of rust and mildew. The narrow tunnel stretched ahead, lit sporadically by flickering bulbs. Tessa was waiting, along with two others, a burly, reptilian prisoner with a massive scar across his snout, and a wiry alien with elongated limbs and sharp, glittering eyes. They turned to him as he approached. You made it, Tessa said, her tone approving. This is Rax and Silrin. They're part of the network. Ethan nodded in greeting, though his focus remained on Tessa. What's the plan? Tessa gestured to a crudely drawn map spread out on the ground. We've been mapping the tunnels for months. There's a power junction here. She pointed to a marked spot. Near the southern perimeter. If we can disrupt it, we can disable the drones and create a window to breach the outer wall. And the guards? Ethan asked. That's where you come in, Tessa said. We need someone to create a diversion, draw their attention away from the junction. Ethan's mind worked quickly, evaluating the risks. How much time will you need? 10 minutes, Tessa said. Maybe 15. Ethan nodded. I'll do it. But when the time comes, you'll need to move fast. Rax grunted, his deep voice rumbling through the tunnel. You've got guts, human. Let's hope you've got the brains to match. Silrin, the wiry alien, tilted his head, his sharp eyes glinting. If this works, we'll owe you. If it doesn't, well, we won't live to regret it. Ethan smirked. Optimism. I like it. Tessa rolled up the map, her expression serious. Get some rest. We'll need to move soon. And Cross, don't get caught. Back in his cell, Ethan lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling. The plan was risky, but it was the best shot they had. His thoughts drifted to the Empire, to the arrogance that had landed him here. They thought they'd broken him, but they were wrong. Tomorrow, the game would change. And Ethan Cross was determined to be the one holding the board.